The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome to How to Effectively Include Planned Gifts in Your Campaign. My name is Nerea Hoff. I'm the Marketing Associate here at Collins Group, a division of Campbell and Company, and we thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Remember, it's an election day, so don't forget to vote. I'm sitting here in our Seattle office with Aggie Sweeney, President and CEO of Campbell of Collins Division, and then Amy Brown, our Senior Consultant in Portland, is also joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to go over just a few logistics. So to make sure that you have a really great technological experience today, make sure that GoToWebinar is the only program that's running on your computer right now. We also highly suggest that you call in using a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. So you'll see in your user panel that there are some audio options, and you can either use your computer or your telephone. And if you click on telephone, it will give you the dial-in information. We also suggest that you mute your phone to avoid any feedback. And if you have any issues of a visual nature, please send us a chat using the chat box in your user panel. And if you have any audio problems, please call GoToWebinar at their 800 number there. And yes, this webinar, including the slides and audio, will be available for viewing and download on our website later today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Aggie and Amy, who can tell you a little bit more about their background and what we'll be covering today.
Hello, everyone. We're delighted to have you join us for the webinar today. I'm Aggie Sweeney, President and CEO of Collins Group, a division of Campbell and Company. And today we have over 160 people registered for the webinar, which I'm delighted that so many of you feel that this is a topic you wanted to spend an hour learning more about and exploring. I wanted to mention that those of you registered today represent all of the Northwest states, plus we have a number of folks that are from throughout the country, some in the Northeast, some in the Southwest, and throughout the country. And you represent board members, CEOs, senior VPs of development, other development staff members. So it's a very broad group, along with a few consultants, too, I noticed on the list. So thank you for joining us. So many of you already know me. For those of you that don't, I've been part of Collins Group for the last 15-plus years, and prior to this worked in nonprofits for 25 years. In my role as a consultant, I've been able to advise over 100 organizations on all phases of fundraising and preparing for it, and evaluating development programs. Over the years, I've really grown to specialize in complex campaign strategies and have served as a coach and CEO for many organizations. Amy?
Yes, thanks. I'm Amy Brown, and I'm a senior consultant with Collins Group based in Portland, Oregon. And with over 20 years in the nonprofit field, I've had the opportunity to work on numerous campaigns ranging from $1 million to $39 million. And I truly enjoy helping nonprofits strengthen their impact through philanthropy, and have seen firsthand how planned gifts can transform organizations. So I'm really excited to talk with you today about planned gifts as part of a campaign.
We have a few opportunities for you to complete polls, 2 opportunities today. Nerea, do you want to tell us about this one?
Yes, so we would like to hear from you if you are in a campaign and what the status of your campaign is right now.
So please go ahead and complete that. You should see on the panel on the right of your screen where you can answer the poll, and then we'll report back to you in a few minutes what we learn. Amy?
Great. Well, in this session, Aggie and I are going to talk about several things. First of all, how to advance your organizational vision by incorporating planned gifts into your campaign. Next, how to engage volunteers and staff to help you secure planned gifts. Also, how planned gifts can help you reach your campaign goal without jeopardizing your current fundraising. How to easily incorporate planned gifts into conversations with donors, and several options and ideas for recognizing planned gifts.
So we have the results back from the polls. It looks like 40% of you are in the planning process of a campaign. Another 40% have a campaign currently underway, and 21% of you have no campaign planned at this time.
Great. Thanks.
This next slide is a gentleman who looks a bit frustrated. So the question is this you or perhaps a development officer in your organization? Because one of the biggest challenges we've found with planned giving is clearly defining what it is. So we thought we'd start with a simple definition. So what is planned giving really? This definition is compliments of the planned giving blog, says that planned giving occurs when the values of an institution align with the donor's values to the extent that it becomes the donor's belief that these values should be preserved for the future. We like this definition because it acknowledges that fundraising is all about aligning donors' values and the values of your organization. And planned giving is really about your strongest supporters aligning so much with your values that they firmly believe they should be preserved. When donors get to this point, the types of planned or lifetime gifts that they make are simply a matter of choice. The gift could be a bequest, a portion of their retirement funds, a large immediate gift, or whatever. I think it's worth noting that many of us call planned gifts deferred gifts. However, a problem with this name is that some planned gifts are intended to be immediate and not to be received in the future or after a donor's death. So the name deferred gift can also be confusing to donors because they're making an immediate commitment, no matter how long it might take to get to your organization, assuming it does. So who is a typical planned gift donor? Well, we believe it's someone who has a deep understanding of your mission and often a very long-term investment in your mission, such as long-time annual supporters or staff or board members. They're folks that have confidence that you'll be needed and around in the future because most planned gifts are bequests and donors want to know that your work will continue when they're gone. They also typically have a desire to leave a legacy that's going to protect your mission, help you realize your vision, and protect the investments that they've already made. Of course, planned giving donors can also be individuals who have never given to you. They may be recipients of your services who are so grateful that they want to give back, such as grateful patients. And we've all heard about folks who ask their estate planning professionals for names of reputable organizations with missions that align with their values. And then they just choose one on the spot without any prior connection. And we certainly hope your organization has been the recipient of such a windfall. If not, you may want to get acquainted with the estate planning professionals in your community.
We thought it would be good to take a minute and just think about how many donors make planned gifts, especially those that are deferred, and what portion of total giving these end up being every year. We know from various research that a simple bequest is the most common gift made in the category of planned and deferred gifts. And I wanted to share with you some data from Giving USA. Probably most of you are familiar with the annual report that comes out. I happen to be one of the board members of the Giving USA Foundation and thought it might be helpful to take a look at this. So last year, it's estimated that total giving in our country was a bit over $335 billion. And of that total amount, 8% came in the form of bequests. Now there are types of plan gifts that are not bequests, and so total plan gifts is even larger than this 8%. But as you can see, that bequests are about half as much as what was given by foundations and more than what was given by corporations. So when we take this into account, we can really see that bequests and other types of plan gifts really are a significant proportion of all giving. I'm also, by talking with some of the researchers that work on Giving USA data and following some of what's been written, I wanted to share a few other statistics with you. First, I want to point out that this level of giving through bequests is pretty typical. Over the last 40 years, we've seen that this percent has fluctuated so that it's generally 7 to 9% of total giving. We know that estates valued at $1 million and more account for 3/4 of all bequests. And we know that 1 out of 5 estates include provision for charity in their estate plans, and bequests, of course, are the most common. Most people address the needs of their heirs before including charities in their estate plans. And when estates are larger than 20 million, charities are most often included. And there's a perception that the needs of heirs are often met on these larger estates.
Next, we're going to talk about the reasons for including plan gifts in your campaign. For starters, they can help you advance your vision by addressing goals in your strategic plan. As an example, one client that we're working with is directing future plan gifts towards a scholarship fund so that more underprivileged kids can participate in their science camp. Of course, they're also seeking current scholarship gifts for the campaign, but the future gifts will allow them to extend the impact of the giving well beyond the campaign. Plan gifts can also help you capitalize on opportunities that are revealed in a campaign planning study. And feasibility studies often uncover many unknown potential gifts. In my experience, it's not uncommon for 20 to 30% of the study participants to reveal a previously unknown or potential estate gifts. And these are clearly really hot opportunities, and it would be a shame to leave them on the table by not including plan gifts in your campaign. Another reason is that campaigns can provide a great platform for developing or refining your plan giving program. They're super at helping nudge you to get your policies, your procedures, and all of your resources in order. And plan gifts can enable donors to make larger gifts to your campaign because gifts of assets, of course, are typically larger and can increase the gift size. Also, plan gifts in a campaign often motivate fence sitters to take action. And how many of you have board members or other close friends who've been talking about including your organization in their estate plan for some time, but haven't quite gotten around to doing it? Well, a campaign can be just the ticket to get them to do so, because the plan gifts can enable them to make sizable contributions that make them look and feel like campaign champions. By including plan gifts in your campaign, you're also likely to reveal some unvalued estate expectancies because campaigns often motivate donors to provide values for previously unvalued estate expectancies. They want their gift to count towards your campaign goal, assuming it meets your counting criteria, which Aggie's going to talk about shortly. And last but not least, by including plan gifts in your campaign, you really can deepen relationships with your donors because you're giving them the opportunity to leave a significant legacy or lifetime gift that aligns with their values. With so many benefits, what could possibly be keeping you from including plan giving in your campaigns? Could it be this guy? As many of us know, this is how many nonprofit staff and volunteers think about plan giving. They think of it as a specialty program only understood by the retired tax and estate attorney who's now your plan giving consultant or perhaps your plan giving officer. Many think of plan giving as being outside the realm of typical fundraising, And some even think of it as something morbid because they associated it with death, and who wants to talk about that? Let's look at some other reasons why nonprofits might not include planned giving in their campaigns. First off, valuing planned gifts can be difficult, especially in the context of a campaign. Next, planned gifts require some special counting and crediting, and again, Aggie's going to talk more about this momentarily. Then there are fundraisers who are so goal-oriented that they only pursue gifts that they can count towards their campaign, and they might ignore planned giving opportunities that don't fit within their gift counting guidelines for the campaign. Of course, we know this isn't you because your relationships with your donors, not your campaign goals or timeline, are always your top priority. And speaking of timelines, donor and campaign timelines don't always align. There's clearly a natural tension between campaigns and planned gifts because campaigns are finite, maybe 3 to 5 years, and planned gifts are relationship-based and often have a very long-term payout. And last but not least, there can be internal resistance, and it can be a real challenge to get some staff and volunteers comfortable about including planned gifts in your campaign. Since internal resistance is a big one, we want to talk more about this. One of the most common challenges that development directors tell us they encounter is that their CEO wants the money now, not decades from now. And while some planned gifts can address current campaign needs, think gifts of securities or bequests that are realized during a campaign period, it's really important to help your CEO understand that planned gifts can address tomorrow's current needs and that they can be an incredible form of mission insurance. We also hear that a bequest isn't a real gift because the donor can change the beneficiary at any time. Well, did you know that less than 5% change their charitable beneficiaries? And when a nonprofit becomes the beneficiary of someone's will, the donor becomes incredibly bound to your organization in a very powerful way. Another resistance we hear is we don't have a planned giving officer. And although it's important for someone on staff to have or at least have access to a working knowledge of planned giving opportunities, as Aggie mentioned, over 80% of all planned gifts are simple bequests that don't require any technical experience. Another concern that we hear is that accepting planned gifts will artificially inflate our campaign totals. Well, not if you have clear goals and counting guidelines. For example, you can designate that you'll only count planned gifts that will be realized within a certain time frame for specific components of your campaign. So, for example, a bequest pledge wouldn't count towards a building project that requires immediate funding, but it could count towards a scholarship fund that you intend to grow beyond the campaign. So how do you engage staff and volunteers in planned giving for your campaign? Well, you might want to start by demystifying it and letting them know that 80% of planned gifts are simple bequests that don't require technical expertise. You can also share the many benefits of including planned giving in your campaign, and you are more than welcome to use the benefits that we noted on a previous slide. As Nerea mentioned, we'll be posting this on our website, and it's slide 11. Also, emphasize the donor relationship aspect. As we stated earlier, planned gifts typically deepen your relationship with your donors because they are rooted in the mutual values that you share. And I always find it helpful to acknowledge their fear and really work on building their confidence. And you can do that by equipping them with basic training, tools, and resources, and including a clear and compelling case for support with some sample talking points. And you want to just make sure also that your basic planned giving information is available on your website, including pledge forms and sample bequest language. You want to make it easy for volunteers and staff and donors to access it. You might also seek staff and volunteer input as you develop your campaign case for support and call out the components that would lend themselves well to planned gifts. And as we mentioned earlier, say a scholarship fund or perhaps a maintenance endowment or fellowships. And you can invite your volunteers and staff to serve on your campaign team also so they can see firsthand how planned gifts are helping you achieve your campaign and strategic goals. And last but not least, you can invite them to make a planned gift themselves because the experience will not only give them confidence as they seek gifts from others, but they'll also likely make them feel really good. So when you're identifying and qualifying your planned gifts prospects, you might want to start with those supporters who, according to your feasibility study, have indicated that they have included or might include you in their estate plans, but have yet to tell you about that, because clearly these are very hot prospects. And since frequency of giving is the single most important gift indicator for planned giving, you'll also want to target your longtime supporters who are clearly invested in your work. This can be your annual giving donors that have been with you for a long time volunteers. Also want to consider current and former board members, longtime staff, grateful constituents. Supporters who are single or widowed or without children can also be good potential planned gift donors. And since planned gifts satisfy your supporters' core values, you need to really find out what those values are if you don't already know that. You might start with a well screen to see what other organizations they support, and obviously to better understand the assets that they hold. And whenever possible, we encourage folks to meet face-to-face with their top prospects. Thank them for their support directly, talk about what they value and how your campaign might help them further realize their values. So for example, if they're annual supporters of your scholarship fund, they're likely prime prospects for a planned gift to endow a scholarship fund as part of your campaign. And of course, you also want donors to continue their annual support. Fortunately, your best planned gift prospects are your longtime supporters who understand the importance of annual giving, and most are likely to continue making annual gifts if you ask them. And in the feasibility studies we conduct, this point is confirmed time and again. The next two slides include some sample talking points for requesting a planned gift. And of course, the asks would come when your donors are sufficiently engaged and ready to make a gift, which can take a while because this is clearly a relationship building process. But we wanted to give you a few points. So for example, you could say something like, since you're a dear friend of our organization and you clearly value what we do, whatever that is, would you consider designating our organization as a beneficiary of your 401k? Beneficiary gifts are among the easiest to make. They basically involve notifying your account custodian of a beneficiary update. Another example, again, since you're a dear friend of ours and you clearly value what we do, would you consider pledging a future gift of a certain dollar amount to our organization in your estate plans? And if helpful, I'd be happy to provide you with some sample language to share with your estate advisor. And it's always important to suggest they speak with their own estate and tax advisor. It's just helpful from a liability standpoint as well. And since peer-to-peer asks are clearly the most powerful, we wanted to give you a sample peer ask. So for example, I recently endowed my annual scholarship gift for such and such organization by designating $100,000 in my estate plan. As a long supporter of this organization's scholarship program who clearly understands its value, could you consider joining me with a similar gift? And that joining me is the key there. And of course, you want to make sure they say, I'm still making my annual contribution to the organization and hope you will consider doing the same. So those are just some sample talking points we wanted to give you. There's clearly many, many more, and these would come at the ask point, not obviously the discovery point. But next, Aggie's going to talk a bit about policies, goal setting, and recognition as they relate to planned gifts in a campaign.
Great. Thanks a lot, Amy. I recognize as I'm working with many organizations, helping them put together their campaign plans, that more often than not, the campaign is raising funds for a number of organizational priorities. And I always like to ask nonprofits to consider including endowment or a fund for the future so that they can expand the conversations with their donors. And sometimes that happens and other times it doesn't. But in assuming that you're doing an endowment campaign which has an emphasis on planned gifts, or you're doing a campaign that can accommodate receiving gifts in the future, let's talk about what some of the policies are that you will need. And some of these you probably already have in place, and some of the others will likely be different. So first, your gift acceptance policies. I would assume most everybody participating in the webinar today has a GAP, gift acceptance policy for your organization. And it tends to state what kind of gifts can you accept, when will unrestricted gifts perhaps be used to fund endowment, and is there a minimum for restricted or named funds. The second type of policy is a campaign gift counting policy. So this is specific to the campaign that you have underway. And let's say it's the Campaign for Vision 2020, and I use that name because we have a few campaigns underway that's at least part of the name or the vision that they're working towards. So the campaign gift counting policies will state the fundraising period, the payout period for campaign gifts, and if current and future gifts are included in the campaign and what the goals are for each. It will also include information about gift acknowledgement and gift recording, and then how gifts will be counted and reported in campaign totals. And when we look at planned gifts and how this can get a little bit tricky in campaign gift counting, is particularly for the revocable planned gifts, such as bequests, but there are other types too, where a donor is in conversations with you during the campaign and they want their gift to count towards the campaign, but your organization may not receive it for a number of years. So it's important to have the gift counting policies clear. Another type of policy is your campaign donor recognition, and this is where you will set out at what level of gift donors will be recognized and how they will be recognized. This is usually where you will include your campaign space naming opportunities or fund naming opportunities or endowed positions or programs that would carry a donor's name or be named in a way that it recognizes the donor's investment in them. And the campaign donor recognition can also state if gifts are an outright gift payable within 5 years, if it's a deferred gift but irrevocable, or if it's a revocable deferred gift, how the recognition will be completed and when it will be completed. I was meeting last week with one of our higher education clients, and we were talking through, they're in their first year of a 7-year campaign, we were talking through how they will count and recognize gifts that are partially outright payable in the next 5 years and partially deferred and revocable. So it was rather complex to talk through all of those situations, but we recognized that the advancement team was glad to be having the conversations now rather than trying to sort it out in conversations with prospective donors. And they also recognized that they really needed to engage the CFO before they finalized their policies. If you have investments in your organization, whether it be a permanent endowment or a reserve fund that is invested, of course it's important to have investment policies. I find that generally it's not the development committee but the finance committee that will help to establish what your investment policies are and provide direction to your fund manager on how to manage those funds to be in alignment with your policies. It's important as development professionals and development volunteers, that if your campaign is raising funds that will be raising gifts that will be going into investment accounts, often endowment, but it can be reserve accounts, that you're clear what the investment policies are, and if they are not yet developed, that you work with your organizational leaders to develop them. So as Amy mentioned, we really are looking at current use planned gifts and future use planned gifts. And I wanted to share a few examples with you of these kinds of gifts, recognizing that we probably are not necessarily covering every possibility, but we'll cover many. So the first current use planned gifts are bequests that are received during the campaign period. And it can be helpful for you to, early in your planning effort, to determine if your organization receives bequests, the payout of bequests during the campaign period, how they will be allocated. Some organizations have policies that would automatically put bequests into an endowment fund or a fund for the future. Others, they're considered unrestricted gifts and are applied to the organization's top priorities if they come in as unrestricted bequests. Of course, they may come in as donor restricted. So it's helpful to be thinking about them, but I have found in many multi-year campaigns that there will be bequests that come in. The second is gifts from qualified retirement accounts, and it's often very beneficial to donors to give to charity from IRAs or 401ks because of complications of passing along retirement funds that were originally tax was not paid on them. Passing them along to heirs can sometimes be a bit complicated, but giving them directly to charity works really well. So often these gifts are great. I was in a meeting with one of my clients a year or two ago, and we were meeting with a number of their long-term board members, top prospects for making legacy gifts to the organization. And Jerry said, you know, it's really hard to rethink your will. He said, a lot of my friends have said I'd rather, you know, have a tooth pulled out than have to go back and rethink a will. But it's really easy to change the beneficiary on a retirement account. And it's often even easier than including a nonprofit in a will. The next type of planned gift can be publicly traded securities. And I would assume that all of your organizations are, you know, well prepared to accept those. Closely held stock can be a little bit harder to look at how you convert that to cash, but often is a type of planned gift. And tangible personal property. Your organization's gift acceptance policies may spell out how you would determine if you accept personal property and how you would go about deciding to keep it or to dispose of it and how you would value it. Gifts of real estate, again, similar. Paid up life insurance policies can be very beneficial in that when we refer to it as paid up, the charity ends up owning the policy without needing to maintain any annual payments on it. And then when the person whose life is insured, when that person dies, then the benefit is given to the nonprofit. And also a charitable lead trust. We know that many of the fairly significant in size gifts that come to nonprofits that are irrevocable deferred gifts or even current gifts are charitable lead trusts. And this is where the trust is in the benefit of the donor in how they manage and put together their estate plans, and the organization receives payouts from the trust early, and often they're set up so that heirs will end up with the remainder of the trust down the road. So let's talk about some of the future planned gifts. This starts often with gifts that have to do with a will or trust, bequests, and estate notes. It can also be income-generating gifts. And as we talk about these, often these are put together either simply but often with the advice of professionals that are advising the donor. A charitable remainder trust is one where the remainder of the trust goes to the charity rather than the lead trust where the charity receives funds early on. Charitable gift annuities, many organizations are set up to provide these, and they pay life to the donor. Excuse me, they pay, there's a payout to the donor for the donor's life, and then any residual that's left goes to the charity at the end. And then there's also can be qualified retirement plans and life insurance where the beneficiary is the nonprofit or retained life estates. We find with many of these types of future plan gifts that advisors have been involved in them, and they can be very beneficial to the organization. Some of these are a bit harder to count in current campaign totals, but that doesn't mean that it's not beneficial to the organization to work with them. So we have our next poll. Nerea, do you want to introduce this?
Sure, we would love to hear from you to find out if you have a planned gift recognition society. So 3 answers, yes, no, or you're working on it. And you just have a few more seconds here to answer before we move on to the next slide.
Okay, so please go ahead and respond to that poll. What Amy and I wanted to do is provide a few opportunities during the webinar for you to ask questions, and we can answer them. Because of how many people are involved in the webinar, we aren't able to just open the phone line, so to speak. But you do have an opportunity to type in any questions that you may have, and Nerea will help us review what's come in and answer those. And we can take a moment to do that now. And we have a few more slides that we wanted to share with you, and then we have our final 10 minutes of this hour that we'll be able to address questions to. So Nerea, are there any questions that have come in that would be helpful for us to answer now?
You know, I'm not seeing any, and I think we're having a bit of a, here we go. Yes, there are. Okay. Okay, this question is from Daniel, and he wants to know if is there anything pending in Congress for planned giving?
You know, the question of anything pending in Congress for planned giving, I don't have any particular knowledge of that right now. Amy, are you aware of anything?
The charitable IRA rollover, if someone is 70 and a half, they can hopefully Congress will allow them to donate $100,000 to charity, but that, as we know, is pending and probably, from what we've heard, won't be decided until after the elections.
Yes. There's often a lot that happens between early November and the end of the year. Yeah, and there's many different pieces of legislation that have been proposed that will impact the charitable gift tax deduction and will impact how charitable giving will work related to income tax. But specifically on planned gifts, I'm not aware of any. There's actually some folks on the webinar today that probably have more knowledge in this area than I do, and if anyone feels that they want to add more of an answer, we'll incorporate that and send it out to everybody. Any other questions, Nerea, that we could answer now?
Yes, this is from Elizabeth. I know there's an art to identifying and qualifying likely donors. Can you give us some resources?
Amy talked about some of the ways to identify potential plan giving donors earlier. Amy, do you want to repeat some of those ideas, and then if you have any additional resources, anything that you'd want to suggest?
Sure. Well, certainly the wealth screen can be very helpful because it can help you identify, what are their assets, and clearly that's valuable information to have. In terms of other specifics, I mean, we always encourage you to talk with your donors and really uncover their values and understand what's important to them. And if you're in a campaign, you hopefully have a campaign team of folks that you are able to talk with and gather additional information that would be very confidential. But really just, I think, getting a sense of what other organizations they give to so you can see what in particular they value, so that when you are talking with them, you can put together appropriate asks that align with their values.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in my experience, many donors that include a nonprofit in their estate plans are unknown to the nonprofit, or that they had significant wealth was unknown to the nonprofit. So it's helpful to think about everyone, even the person that just writes the $50 check or comes to your luncheon one year, really is someone who's a planned giving prospect for your organization. They may not be your top prospect, but just important to keep that in mind. How about one more question, and then we'll get the answers to the poll and go on to the next few slides.
Sure. This is from Deborah. If we are not doing a campaign, how can we effectively do a plan to give strategy?
So if you're not in a campaign but want to effectively do a plan gift strategy, I have found that it's really helpful for organizations to establish some goals, and we'll be talking a little bit about putting together a society or donor recognition group to really honor those who have shared with the organization that they've included you in their estate plans, and that can be really beneficial. And it's important to allocate resources, but more often than not, a donor who wants to include your organization in their estate plans has a real feeling of being close to you and admiring the work that you do, and often building relationships built upon trust and integrity is very beneficial. Amy, do you want to add anything else?
Sure, just that, this is a great time when you're not in a campaign to really look at the longtime supporters that have been given to you regularly and put together some customized relationship building strategies for those that are your most frequent supporters, longtime volunteers, those who are really close to you. Clearly setting the stage and making sure you have your policies and procedures in order, as Aggie was talking about, is a good thing to do so that you are prepared when those gifts come in. And just keeping them current, meeting with them regularly or keeping them informed in ways that work for them.
Okay, great, thank you. Do you want to give us the results of the poll, Norea?
Yes, so looks like 53% of you do have a planned gift recognition society, 30% do not, and 17% are working on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we wanted to share a bit more information, and then we'll take more of your questions. We recognize that often in campaigns there's not necessarily a specific endowment goal. Sometimes there is. But it can be helpful within your campaign plans to include a fund for the future. And this can be a place where both irrevocable and revocable future plan gifts can go. And it can also be a way for pledge payments that extend past your campaign period can be allocated. So let's say, for instance, that a donor wants to make a significant gift to your campaign, say $1 million gift, but wants to pay it in 10 annual payments, each of $100,000. But your campaign policies restrict you to only accepting current gifts that are payable within 5 years. So rather than saying, sorry, we can't accept your $1 million gift, we'd only count it as $500,000, you could say that the final $500,000 that's payable in those future years, more than 5 years out, would go into a fund for the future. And a fund for the future, it can be a reserve fund, it can be permanently endowed, it can be for however your organization decides, best meets your vision and your strategic plans, goals. It doesn't necessarily have to be a permanent endowment. So let's talk a little bit about the standards for what counts towards a campaign goal. Campaign periods are typically 2 to 8 years long, and pledge payments for current gifts are usually up to 5 years. And this would include gifts and pledges that are received during the campaign period, future gifts included in the campaign counting guidelines, future gifts counted in only one campaign, and unfulfilled pledges would be subtracted out from it. One thing that I wanted to point out can happen sometimes is, especially with a revocable deferred gift, such as a bequest, the most common, but it can also be, being the beneficiary on a retirement account or life insurance that hasn't yet been turned over to the organization, but just the beneficiary listing. It's important to look at, in counting your totals for any one campaign, that you only count the same deferred gift once. And we joked within the firm that we have a sense that often, if you added up all of the campaigns that a particular nonprofit may have over a 20 or 30-year period, that some of those planned gifts may have gotten counted more than once. We're working with one higher education institution right now that the way that their gift counting policies are coming together for how they count for the campaign totals is that if a donor during the campaign period turns 65 or is already 65 or older, and they're including the institution in their estate plans with a bequest or another revocable gift, that gift will be counted as a future deferred gift only if they meet that age requirement. And if someone indicates that they're including the institution in their estate plans, but they're under age 65, then it won't be counted in their campaign totals. So I think that can be helpful to think about in including your policies. So let's talk about a bit about counting, crediting, valuing, and accounting for gifts. So simply, counting is the numeric summary of activity results in progress towards a goal. The crediting is institution-specific, and it represents how each organization grants recognition to its donor. Often, a donor will be credited for gifts that they helped to make possible, but they may not have directly given. And an example of this would be if a corporation matches employee giving, then often the donor is credited for the size of their own gift plus what the match is. The valuation is a reflection of the present value of the ultimate purchasing power of a gift. And we'll get into this a little bit more in a minute. And accounting is the process of keeping the financial books passed on and a set of generally accepted guidelines and principles in order to represent a fair, comparable, and understandable picture of an organization's financial state at any time. What can be challenging in campaign reporting is having alignment between what the campaign reports and what comes out of the financial records or accounting records of the institution, and to be able to explain if there's any differences between the two. So let's take a moment and talk a bit about campaign gift counting. It provides a way for nonprofits to record what they do so it can be shared with the public. It provides a way to measure the donor intent. It reports numbers as record of activity towards clear goals during the campaign period. And it looks at future valuation is not necessarily relevant, but looking at how gifts are currently valued. So let's talk a bit about face value and present value. And what we find is that how future gifts are valued in campaigns varies from institution to institution. And it's helpful to refer to some of the various guidelines that come out. PPP, the Philanthropic Planning Partners, formerly the National Plan Giving Council, has guidelines for valuing gifts. But we have found that while their guidelines are very helpful, that other institutions, including CASE, also have guidelines. And it's just helpful for each organization to sort out how they want to look at values. So face value is the dollar amount of a gift when it is made. So if someone today gives you a gift of $100, it's worth $100. But if someone pledges a gift of $100 that you will receive in 20 years, what's that worth? The present value is an IRS calculation based on the gift amount, the donor's age, and the applied federal rate. It estimates the future value of a gift in today's dollars. Most campaigns count future gifts at face value and also report them separately from current gifts. And we have found that doing a present value for a gift that will be received in the future is very possible, but we have found that it's much more common to report gifts that will be received in the future separately from current gifts received in the next 5 years, and to stay with the face value as the number that you report for future gifts, even though that would not be necessarily what would be included in your accounting records. Now let's talk a little bit about planned gift crediting in a campaign, and I'm going to go through this information pretty quickly because we want to get to your questions. Campaign planned gift recognition should always be separate from that of current gift pledge donors. It usually involves a dedicated planned giving legacy society, and I'm glad to hear that many of you already have those started. Planned gift amounts need to receive benefits sometimes different than cash amount required. And naming recognition generally is withheld until the future gift is received. And if there's exceptions to that, then it's helpful to record those and report those out in advance. Crediting planned gifts in a campaign. So campaign planned gift recognition should always be separate from that of current gift pledge donors. It usually involves a dedicated planned giving society. I'm sorry, we doubled the slide. So are you ready to include planned giving in your campaign? First, let's just go through a checklist of things. First, it needs to align with and advance your mission. It needs to be endorsed by your leadership. You want to make sure that it won't jeopardize your current funding needs. It's helpful to have your top prospects identified and qualified, especially if you're setting specific goals for either the number of planned gifts that you will receive or specific dollar goals. It's important to have a compelling case for support for making a planned gift. It's helpful to have systems in place, and we've gone through many of these already, and to have staff that will be comfortable in talking about planned gifts. And the staff can be your development team, your major gift officers. Some organizations have dedicated planned giving staff, but that's often with only the larger development shops. And we mentioned policies and procedures. They need to be in place as you're getting started. And finally, assuming that you want to have campaign volunteers be able to talk about planned gifts in the campaign, current and deferred, it's helpful to equip them and prepare them for their roles. So we've enjoyed providing this information to you. We've got some time left, so let's go back to some questions. Nerea?
Great, this is from Rachel. She asked, would you include campaign recognition for a bequest donor whose gift was realized during the campaign, but who did not necessarily know about the campaign or have that intention?
You know, that's a really good question. One of our recent clients was looking at using a bequest that they had recently received as the lead gift for a campaign. And the bequest came to the organization unrestricted. And what that organization decided to do is they talked to some of the heirs of the deceased donor and some of the friends of the donor that had helped to make the connection to the organization, and decided to go ahead and apply this wonderful multi-million-dollar gift to the organization's top funding priority at that time. So, you know, it's very possible to do that. If it hasn't been the donor's intent that it go for that purpose, it's always helpful if there are family members or friends to include in that. Amy, anything you want to add?
No, just that, again, you want to look at the donor intent, and obviously if it's restricted and doesn't fit, but also perhaps looking at it within the context of your other significant donor opportunities. If there's a naming opportunity that you're talking with someone else about and this would knock them out, then you certainly want to take that into consideration. But donor intent is clearly the most important.
Okay, thanks.
Great, here's a question from Rebecca. She said, our board planned giving committee really wants to host a planned giving seminar for our donors. Please talk about the value of this approach and any cautionary points.
Amy, do you want to cover that one?
Sure. The seminar is great in terms of raising awareness that you have planned giving opportunities that you're engaging. Certainly if you've got some expertise on hand, or if you're working with a community foundation, for example, that might be managing your account or your endowment, they may often have resources. But I think it's just a great education opportunity. In terms of concerns or downsides, you just want to be certain that if you are engaging, say, for example, some estate planning attorneys or whatever, that you are careful it doesn't come across as a sales pitch. The last thing you want to do is turn your donors off.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I have found that starting with the board and your closest insiders is really helpful. And then their word of mouth that, oh, that was really a great seminar, I learned a lot, you know, can help with developing the comfort among other supporters so that, as Amy said, it doesn't end up feeling like a sales pitch.
Okay, I think we'll take one more question. This is from Daniel. He asked, what are typical fees for campaign managers like Collins? It's not specifically about planned giving, but if you were, I think he's asking if you want a consultant to help you with your campaign.
Fees really vary based upon each organization's needs, and we'd be happy to talk with anyone who would like to make a direct inquiry. Fees are not based on a percent, and you know, it varies based upon the amount of time that consultants would invest in your project.
Okay, I want to say thank you to everyone for their questions, and if we didn't get to your question today, We do have a record of that, so I will do my best to get those answered via email for you this week. And I'd like to point out that we have another webinar coming up on November 12th, which is next Wednesday, and that's about relationship management, being presented by Campbell & Company, our Strategic Information Services team, which includes our own, I believe Kate Bantagreen will be on that, that webinar as well. She's a consultant here. If you have any other questions or want to get in touch, please email Aggie or Amy or myself. You can also reach us via Twitter, and there's tons of information on our website about our different services and upcoming presentations and all kinds of resources as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.